Welcome to CT Politics TV. I am Joe Aguiar, joined by my lovely co-host, Michelle
Michelle
Botelho.
Botelho.
Yeah, Michelle. We're starting this brand new thing here on CT Politics TV. We're going to be doing a weekly newscast, and we're going to have some great guests that we're going to be interviewing. And we decided tonight to start the show and to kind of do it a little bit different from a formatic standpoint. And we're just going to spend a whole entire hour with two of our favorites, the independent party ticket, Rob Hotaling, and Dr. Chip Beckett. Gentlemen, welcome and thanks for being with us.
Here they are.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
All right. Now, I've talked to both of you, spent a lot of time with Dr. Beckett working there at WICC. We've had some great conversations. One of the biggest things that I have heard from people is that Rob Hotaling is not a legit candidate. He's got no political experience. I'm voting for Bob Stefanowski. And I say, wait a minute. What is the experience of Bob Stefanowski? So how does that make you feel, Rob? I don't mean to come off all rough, but I hear that a lot. I hate it. Explain to people why this is such a nonsensical argument.
I really would. I think that folks misunderstand or they just think it's all about money. Money, you could be an empty suit and have money and have no ideas and no way of delivering for the people you represent. I would argue I have the best and broadest experience of any candidate right now running for governor. And I'd also argue that Chip's experience in Glastonbury and in some of the councils puts him on par with the Susan Bisowitz or Laura Devlin.
Mm.
So, and from a partnership perspective, I sure haven't disappeared Chip like you. Who's seen Susan? Where is she? Right. So from an experience perspective, I've worked across numerous industries. I've worked in obviously banking and finance, hedge funds, mortgage-backed securities, obviously a large regional bank now. I can go on and on finance, but most folks may not know this. Besides gunshot detection and physical security, public safety, I've also worked in casino gaming. I've also worked in food automation technology, where I was essentially the chief technology officer of a manufacturing company. And then I also worked in patents and trademark searching at a company called Nearac. That's an offshoot of UConn. So I have a very broad experience that I'm pretty proud of. And one of the things I would argue is that really it's about the plans and the ideas. And at some point you would crack, wouldn't you? If you're a fraud after you've been interviewed on everywhere, at some point you go, I got you. I will tell you.
Right.
Bob Stefanowski has nothing but talking points. And I think people have seen when they get them, oh, I misspoke the next day. So, and in the end, this is the problem I really have, Joe. And I have to ask you a question. It seems like Bob and Rob are offset. People are focused on the wrong thing, which is it's really about Ned. Does Ned deserve another 4 years? Who is better to represent the state going forward? And I would ask people, right now we're in inflation. We're in an inflationary cycle. Next, we're going to hit a recession. Between Bob, myself, and Ned, who do you trust more in order to guide us through that? Now, I've given, I think, pretty accurate answers on how do you address inflation. At the debate, I gave what I believe are pretty accurate answers on how you address a recession. I haven't heard anything from Bob. So that would be my response, Joe. So I can go on and on. So I'll stop and give you
great answers, by the way. Great answers.
Let me chime in because I had that question once about Rob and I together. Ned Lamont had virtually no government experience except the Greenwich town meeting for a couple of terms. I was on the town council for 18 years. I was 6 years as chairman of the Glastonbury Town Council, and I was 2 years as chairman of the Capital Region Council of Governments. And Bob has no government experience whatsoever. So I would put Rob and I up against any of them for their government experience. And although Ned has been governor, name me a single legislative priority he has gotten through the legislature. as far as I can tell, it's been zero. He didn't raise the income tax, but other than that, he has not made anything stick at the legislature, whether it be tolls, infrastructure, or any other ideas. So to say he's got talent politically, I think is a misnomer.
Well, it's funny that you say that, Dr. Beckett, because I've spent time with Dr. Beckett, I've spent time with Laura Devlin, and I've spent some time with Susan Beisowitz, and I'll tell you, Dr. Beckett, to me, has been the most impressive. And he and I have had some wide-ranging conversations about a lot of different things, and this guy knows his stuff. And for me, Rob, it makes me feel like an inexperienced, smart fellow like yourself with a guy like that. That makes me feel good about this ticket.
Exactly. And I think so. I would argue this on top of that. It's a smart decision. And how do I interact with my lieutenant governor and running mate? As I said, we're true partners. You've spoken to him. When you separate us, we're saying the same thing. There's not like major daylight between the two of us, right? And I would argue, look, what are we running for? The executive branch. Last time I checked, Laura Devlin is a what? She's a rep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that executive experience? Hold on. Running a city, running a town, that's executive experience last time I checked. And so I just want to, no knock to Laura. She's a smart lady. But I would put Chip up as the best LG. Now, from my perspective, again, I wouldn't running a payday loan company and taking advantage of the less fortunate with high interest rates and saying that CEO experience. Is that what we want in our governor? And then on top of that, pursuing what he's pursued out in the, out there. I'm not going to talk about that. Some folks don't want me to really go there, but Bob can do what he does to earn his money, and that's fine. But you do have to ask about his judgment. Now, Ned Lamont, he comes from multi-generational wealth. Does he really understand the plights of the average person, the middle class, the people who can't afford? He made $54 million selling stock. Before that, he was earning $6.8 million in capital gains. People don't even make $6.08 in capital gains, let alone $6.8 million. He's so out of touch. Look, he's a likable guy, but there's not much there. So really what you want are people in operations. For me, I've always been the level below the CEO. The guy the CEO brings in and says, hey, Rob, fix this problem. Do the numbers, work with that person, deliver that thing. And I go, absolutely. Guess what? I am working for the people. So when you hear Bob say that, when you're the CEO, sometimes people don't really treat you the way. You get a lot of yes men and yes women around you. For me, I've never been that. I've always challenged and been challenged, and I love it, and I've always delivered. So I would argue that we have the best executive experience. And as you mentioned, Joe, when you put us together as a package, yeah, I'm inexperienced from a governmental administrative perspective, but that doesn't mean I'm inexperienced from a financial or large scale organizational perspective, because I've done that in my career. No,
I can actually understand where you're coming from, Rob, too. As you know, I ran as a candidate, and the first question out of anyone's mouth, well, how much money will you raise? Not my policies, not what you're going to do for Connecticut. So it's a little frustrating when they're focused on where you're getting the money from, how much it is. So I understand. But let me ask you, so you have the will of the people, and you sound like you have great ideas. How will you take the will of the people and translate it into public policy? What is your plight to do that? And do you feel like you have that ability, that strength? Do you have, if you will, people say you have no experience, but you sound like you have quite a bit. Do you think you're able to do that?
Absolutely. I think I'm in a unique position because of the independent party and because folks looking for cross endorsements. So normally when they go to the chairman, they often would reach out to me. So I've met a large number of Republican and Democratic state senators and reps. And what's funny about it, when you get them to the side and they're not in a group, they're all pretty like, hey, I like some of your ideas. And hey,
yes,
we agree on a lot of things, but you get them in a group and it's, nope, I can't really agree with you. The disagreeability comes into play. I really believe that when you think about the 2017 legislative session, what was special about that was that it was deadlocked. And guess what
Right.
happened? We had one
Right.
of our best outcomes in state history. Why?
That's
Because the
right.
Republicans and Democrats actually had to work together and negotiate. And they say the best form of negotiation is both parties come away the same level of happiness or the same level of dissatisfaction. That's when you know if it's
Democracy at work, right?
Yeah.
exactly. But when one side walks away and goes, "I got screwed," and the other side's like, "I slam dunked on them," that's not what people want. That means you're going to have the
Right.
pendulum swing. So I
That's right.
believe that Chip and
And nothing
I
gets done.
we're best positioned to do that because, I'm proud of the fact that I was part of both parties. I really am. I was in the Republican Party for years, couple of years, right? And I was part
Mhm.
of, I'm gonna say 3 or 4 years, right? But Democrats probably longer in my 20s. I'm in my mid 40s now, right? But when you look at a whole 20 plus years of being engaged politically, not as a candidate,
Right.
but being engaged politically and understanding the plights of both parties and what they represent in their platforms, being able to listen. And so this is really what you're asking, Michelle. How do you
Yes.
translate it into policy? It starts with listening. And am I actually really listening and comprehending, or I'm just hearing you and I'm going to move on? And for me, I think folks have seen that. Chip and I were at UConn the other day. We went deep into. There are people. There's a woman on a wheelchair, right, Chip? And she was like, "I really got to say, I'm happy you guys came all the way out here and
Oh,
said hello."
nice.
They said
Nice.
Ned just stops at the front, and Bob just does like a drive-by and a wave. They're not meeting the people, and
Right.
really. So the way I look at it is, we'll translate into policy immediately. We have 3 real plans already on our website. We're coming out with a fourth. And when you really stop and look at it, regardless of the outcome of the election, Chip and I, plan to continue to push forward and make sure we have maximum impact in a positive way in our communities across the state of Connecticut.
That sounds great.
Michelle, I think one of the things too about legislative things is you have to be willing to have half a loaf. I think the problem with our extremism now is everybody wants everything, and if they don't get all the marbles, they have to pick
Yeah.
them up and go home.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could agree on 50 or 60% of the things and you make incremental progress and you come back next year and see how you've done and what else you can do. And as
Right.
Rob says, replacing everything doesn't really make sense. When you just say, we're going to throw it all out and replace it, why don't you just fix what you've already got? And there might be big holes in it, but fix the holes. You don't have to necessarily throw it away because there was some good idea in that idea originally.
Absolutely. And have you, walking around and meeting people, I'm sure you guys have found out what the will of the people want, what Connecticut wants.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we're
Go
lucky
ahead, Chip.
Rob handles other people's money and I see people's pets and sell produce. And so
Right.
you hear a lot about day-to-day life in those fields. If you're a hedge fund or you're clipping coupons for dividends for $54 million, you don't really see a big spectrum of
That's for
people.
sure.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and I would argue that there's something missing because really, when you look at it, 20, 30 years, when was the last time we had a statewide that was not a Democrat or a senator that was not? I guess that was really the
Yeah.
early 2000s,
Right.
right?
Right. Was it
Um,
Lieberman? Mhm.
yeah, and you really think about it, and I think what happens, it doesn't matter if it was the Republicans or the Democrats. And I'm really here to talk about what we can do to move forward, but you have to think about it. You want more choice. We've been the choice candidates.
Right.
Because one thing we've learned about the will of the people is that most people want the same thing, Michelle. They want safe neighborhoods. They want their kids to have access to great education system. They want their kids to have opportunities. They want economic opportunities. They want affordable housing. They want, but they also want to
Absolutely.
make sure they maintain certain levels of character, whatever that means in their
That's right.
towns. They want to make sure there's not sirens and gunfire. Nobody wants the police to get hurt, and nobody wants to be abused by the police.
That's right.
Everybody wants the same thing. It's just, how do you get there?
Exactly.
And when you take you stick your foot in the ground, you draw a line, and you're not willing to take that centrist view. And I'm not saying people have to change parties or anything like that. I'm
Right.
saying take a perspective from both sides. Put your foot in the other person's shoe, and then say, okay, what do we both have in common? Ah, I see. And then when you really focus on that, and you leave the other things alone, now you talk about how do we amend what's already in place. So yeah, at the debate, and maybe we'll get into this, and I'll just make this last point and go back to you. But you hear a lot from Bob Stefanowski and his supporters about repeal, repeal, repeal. Problem is, if you repeal it, and I get the sentiment about it because it's
Yeah.
more emotional. But when you think
Right.
about the reality of execution, are you going to put a new thing in place that's right down the party line? Then what happens to do that? And then what happens when the other party gets? But then you have this pendulum swing.
Yeah.
Guys, let's just take
Absolutely.
a breather and just focus on the areas we don't like. Get in a room, hash it out. Don't do it in the middle of the night. Bring the right people in. Do it methodically. And make sure as many people feel either comfortable with
Right.
it or the same level of discomfort with it, which is a still good thing because it means nobody got everything they wanted. That's good for the Connecticut residents. So I'll
Right.
stop there. Go back to you, but you guys, I'll keep going on.
No, it's okay. I actually, that sounds great, but it's true. And what I want to see too is come back is a sense of community, neighborhoods, and people that care for each other again, not this, combative nature that we have right now. So it sounds great.
Yeah.
So here's what we do know is that this election really is basically going to come down to inflation. That's the number one thing that's really on people's minds. It's not any of the other issues.
Right.
And it's funny because your opponents only want to talk about that other stuff. As
Yes.
you said, and I talked to Bob Stefanowski Tuesday, I actually
Right.
talked to him. It's funny at your debate, Rob, he literally took lines that I gave him during our radio conversation right onto the
I
stage.
heard about that.
My jaw was on the floor listening to it. But he doesn't have a plan to fight inflation, and even his
No.
economic plan is not and listen, whatever Governor Lamont is doing, it's not working. So
No.
have at it. What do
Right.
you got?
So really, and I listed them, and this is I just want to be, Chip and I have this joke. It's like they stole another one from us. Let's be real. Bob had parental bill of rights. Was there anything in there really about closing the achievement gap per se? But when we put our education plan, all of a sudden he's talking about closing the achievement
Right. I saw that.
gap. Right? And then right off the top of the debate, I talked about mojo. You can't measure mojo. And then 2 days later, Bob comes out with an ad about mojo. I'm like, hey, man, come on. These guys keep taking our stuff. But I get it. You know what? Imitation is the best form of flattery. When you don't have your own plan, what are you going to do? So look, Joe, you probably have better ideas of inflation than he does. But fundamentally, inflation is controlled by monetary and fiscal policy.
Right.
I've said this over and over again. As someone in banking and economics and finance, you know that, yes, the Fed can increase or decrease rates to cool or heat an economy, and that has this cascading effect. So I get that. I also well understand that fuel and certain types of food are not included in the inflationary numbers, but they're still affected by inflation, right? So when you talk about an inflation plan, you want someone who's actually has a clue about it. And so some of the key things you can do is with fiscal policy, you can show restraint on taxation and spending. Really, you want to draw down your spending, but you don't want to really tax people more. That's worse, right? You want to give money
There's no
back,
spending.
right? Because they're already hurting from inflation.
Right. Right.
So then really what you're talking about is regulation, because you want to address cost of doing business, cost of living. So if I'm a business struggling, and regulations, certain regulations, not all of them, because you need some now, but certain regulations can actually hurt my business. And if I streamline certain activities, that means I have more money back in my pocket as a business. I have more productivity as a business, which means I increase my supply. Why? Because inflation is affected by supply and demand. It's systemic. So if you balance
Right.
out supply and demand, the best way to balance out supply is to help businesses generate that supply.
Right.
It's just, so I'm just, I don't know, Joe. I listen to them and they don't have a lot there. And you really go, guys, even affordable housing, supply and demand.
Oh, that's right.
Inflation affects housing prices. Guess what? Supply and demand. When
Yep.
the demand's too high, the prices rocket up. But when the supply goes up, right, the demand comes down, the prices average out. So the best thing to do is try to get some more housing stock, get more places to live in the state. So addressing affordable housing would be a great way to address inflation, Mr. Lamont. But what did Mr. Lamont do? He deprioritized affordable housing. He hasn't even visited, really, folks. He takes away their special transportation, or their funding essentially for transportation, if I understand this right, if they don't comply. So we have 18% compliance. He makes towns and developers adversaries rather than prioritizing it and going to each and every town. But if we addressed housing generally, not just affordable housing, but housing generally in Connecticut, we could affect it. So there's a couple things, right, in terms of inflation.
And inflation is a worldwide phenomenon. Really, the problem is
That's right.
in a high income state like Connecticut, where we have relatively few people in poverty by comparison to the rest of the country, but it says nobody has any savings, nobody has any margin of safety, because everything is so expensive and so difficult to do. We need to lower the cost of living and make it more affordable. And that's what Connecticut can do about inflation. We can't fight the Ukrainian war. We can't change supply bottlenecks, but we can make it so that it's cheaper to live in Connecticut. So you've got a little bit of savings and margin of safety to carry on your life.
And I want to add one thing, because I think there's nationally, and you can look it up, say I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm glad to be challenged, but I'll tell you, a lot of people think the inflation that we've seen, the record inflation, is because of the Ukrainian war. It's not true. It's monetary policy.
I agree.
What happened? $3 trillion. Now, if I'm George Logan or Johanna Hayes, this is what they need to be talking about.
Right.
I'm just talking about state of Connecticut, but we're affected by inflation. Problem is, when the Treasury says we need $3 trillion. Why? Because we need to send those checks to everyone's houses, which we did because of COVID. I get it. COVID created an environment globally. The U.S. government responded by issuing $3 trillion into the economy. That overheated the economy, which then created inflation. The Treasury, right? The Fed then buys some of that back. Then we reissued another $2 trillion. So now we're $5 trillion added to the economy.
Right.
That creates a systemic cycle that just created this record-breaking inflation.
Too much money, devaluing the dollar. Exactly.
Right. And then the Ukrainian war was just one more thing on top of something systemic that already occurred.
Right.
Again, that's why we need not just state leaders, but we need those running for Congress who have an understanding and appreciation
That's right.
of the relationship of all these things.
Right.
So I go back to it. So like when you hear me and they go, Rob, you have no candidate experience. I go, okay. But when you listen to what I'm saying,
right.
Do you trust me to run your economy through an inflation and a recession? Or do you trust the two rich guys who, what?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Exactly.
Ned said everybody should just sell like 80, 90,000 in stock and you'll be fine. Get over it. And I was like, no, good point. Yes.
Pocket change.
Right.
Well, I know the feds too. They just rate up a little 3/4 of a point of a percentage, in interest, and it hurts the lower class. This is the problem. The lower income class, if you will. It doesn't. If you have money, you're okay. So you're kind of out of touch. But for those of us who live paycheck to paycheck every day, it hurts hard.
But this is the problem. The Fed has to control. The Fed has to increase to cool the overall economy down.
No,
and the U.S. economy is not its own. It affects the rest of the world, the global markets.
That's right.
But this comes back to what the state and the governor can do. See, if I was governor, I'd come out and say, guys, we don't control monetary policy. We can't control the Fed issuing $3 trillion, then doubling down and issuing another $2 trillion and adding all this money. But what we can do is cut taxes and cut our spending. Cut taxes, cut our spending. Cut taxes, cut our spending. It makes it more affordable to live, work, and retire in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And it puts more money back in your pocket, and we ride it out together. But you don't hear Lamont saying that. And I definitely don't hear Bob saying that. So I really hope that people see it's not about the biggest bank account. It really should be about the best ideas. And Chip and I have the best ideas. We're the best team, So I don't know. It's really Batman and Robin. It's more like, who's a good duo? I don't know. More like Iron Man and Captain America.
Who's the one that can fly?
Nice. Yeah.
Leap tall buildings, right? Good.
Now, along those lines, and again, Dr. Beckett, I'll start with you because you and I, again, have spent so much time together. And I'm a small business owner in Connecticut. And Ned Lamont, I don't think has done a very good job. The pandemic aside, which I throw the guy a pass for someone who didn't know what he was doing. it wasn't terrible, right? But you guys, and again, Dr. Beckett, we talked about this. Some of your ideas for business, for startups, just a more friendly business environment in the state, which is something Bob constantly talks about our terrible grades, but again, without much of a here's what I'm going to do.
Well, that's certainly true. I was at the Waterbury NAACP last night, and I told them one of my things really is we don't have small businesses and medium-sized businesses in the cities. So there's no opportunity for economic growth. There's no jobs.
Right.
There's no
Right.
mentors and role models for kids because they've all left. So if we want to be, we're not going to get a GM assembly plant dropped in the 5 major cities, right? With 5,000 employees each.
Right.
If we're going to build our economy, it's going to have to be small and medium-sized businesses. We've lived on our laurels of Electric Boat, Pratt & Whitney, and insurance companies for a very long time. We need new businesses to employ new people as the world changes. And we've got to make it so that, Joe, your business can start, my business can start. And more importantly than that, I've been hearing about businesses that are just closing because there's nobody who wants to take them. Part of the deal has to be somebody wants to buy you and I out so we can retire when we're old. And they have a future and opportunity that they can make the business even better. And that's what we really lack, I think.
And the big problem the big problem too is, our kids learning how to make things and produce things in this country. That was a big platform of mine, actually, too. And I was reading statistics about, they're touting that I believe the economy grew and jobs grew. I want to say I don't know the exact number how many jobs were added to the country, but it was mostly health and utilities and government jobs was up. But I noticed what was down was manufacturing, and we don't produce anything in this country anymore. How can you function as an economy, as a country, without producing anything?
Yeah, in Connecticut, and we've mentioned this from the beginning, we have an 86%, a lopsided 86% service-based economy. We're not saying we shouldn't have that. We obviously need service jobs. But then you'd say, well, if it's 86, that means the remaining 14 is manufacturing.
Right.
No, 12% is manufacturing in Connecticut. The remaining 2 is really construction and other. So when you say 12% is manufacturing, why? A lot of them are leaving.
That's
because
right.
we didn't create the environment. And, Dr. Beckett and I have talked about this a lot, which is, yes, it's business unfriendliness. A lot of it's regulation, but also we don't have integrated ports, rail. We have an infrastructure transportation problem. Lego, in my opinion, is a huge fumble. We have the headquarters here for decades in Enfield, and they totally skipped us right down in Virginia. If I'm Lego, I'd probably do the same thing. I don't blame them, right? What are you going to say?
Right.
And so, but we need to fix it. And so what we believe is that by eliminating those business personal property taxes, by eliminating motor vehicle taxes, by removing certain, like, for example, having to refile the depreciation schedules over and over and over, that takes hours and weeks, and you have to dedicate somebody. So you're actually paying twice. You're paying for the person to do that, and then you pay them the taxes you just gave them when you submitted it. You're like, oh my God, So the thought is that if we really bring this back, how do we bring back manufacturing jobs? You also have to understand if someone who's actually been there. See, I worked at a company called Kitchen Brains. It's a 50-year-old manufacturing company. I think it's probably second or third longest running manufacturing company in the entire state. And I worked directly for the owners, the Kother family. And what I learned, they had a big problem at the point. So they actually manufacture right there. They make their wires, they make these controls. But my point about affordability and why business personal property tax is important, they actually had these machines that are pretty old that they help them manufacture. And one broke down. Naturally, that happens. But you're thinking, boy, I got to buy a new one. Do I buy a used one or do I brand new one? Well, if I buy the brand new one, my productivity is better, it's safer, but the taxes and everything that goes with it is so much
Right,
higher.
right,
But if I
right.
buy this used one, I have less productivity, but I have less taxation. It was a big debate. I totally get it. I'm like, geez, it shouldn't be this way. It should just be, you know what? Buy the right thing for your business. And we
Right.
focus on small to medium-sized businesses. That's what's going to really unlock our economy in our state. Chip, right?
Yeah.
50% of our all employed people are from small and medium-sized business, not big businesses.
Absolutely. And you
So,
know what? That's what makes a great country, a great state, small businesses. Absolutely.
right,
And
right.
I actually worked in manufacturing, believe it or not.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you came from a
crazy. And
family of manufacturing, right, Michelle?
you can't even, I mean, you can't find anyone to hire anymore. This is the problem.
Well,
It's,
I think that we had to take a
we need
hybrid
to teach
approach,
them.
though,
Yeah.
right? So like with regionalization or internationalization, what I mean, and this is the point, working in a manufacturing environment, we know you can't compete to do everything here. You can't ship
Correct. No,
things
understood.
here, put them
Hmm.
together, ship them out, or
Yes.
you can't. So you have to be smart about what you do. We can source certain things. We can bring them in. We can, compile them, put them together, assemble them, ship them. There's a lot of different opportunities. But the
Sure.
point is, this is where again transportation comes in. So if I'm a manufacturing company, now you know I'm going to know what I'm talking about here, Michelle. If you come
Yes.
from manufacturing, if I have to ship in and out a whole lot of parts, I have to pay for that. And so then if I have to, the further I go out, which is why we really need to have a regional from a state like
Right.
New England, tri-state area, maybe the states work together. So as governor, I would work with other states and look who has what material there, who has what manufacturing there, who has what assembly parts there, components there.
Oh,
How do
that's
we work
awesome.
together to help our economies and then ship that out elsewhere and sell to other countries?
I
And then
love it.
when you bring the cost of living down, and
Sure.
maybe you outsource certain things because you can't afford all of the labor at some point. That's
Right.
also a problem, right?
Right. Right. No, that's
So
great.
yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, but I think it
Sure.
starts with understanding manufacturing so you
Right.
can make the right environment for it and you can
Right.
recruit other manufacturers because you speak their language, which Bob and Ned, I guarantee you they probably never gotten their hands dirty with a single wire. I disassembled boards and put them back together. Those
Right.
guys, they probably get scared and like their finger would get shocked. So I don't know.
The other thing I had talked to some people about, we have a lot of different businesses that are small that people don't know about. And how do you bring them together as an ecosystem? So you say somebody that makes roller chain and somebody that makes sprockets can make a conveyor belt because the parts, one guy's in Plainville and one guy's in Shelton, and you send them to Bridgeport or something, and they make that, and somebody else does something. So I think that there's a lot of ways that we could integrate our small and mid-sized businesses just as a marketing agency for like Connecticut grown produce, Connecticut grown manufacturing and supply.
Oh, that would be so nice. Yes, I agree. Ugh.
I would say the second biggest problem in this state behind inflation and obviously the high cost of living is education.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, there is a major achievement gap, but, and if you're looking, and I know Dr. Beckett, we've talked about this. Rob, I think you and I did talk about this as well when we spoke. New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport, the test scores in the third grade, it is unfathomable
Yes.
that we've allowed those scores to get as low as they've gotten. Dr. Beckett, you actually pointed out you could triple the scores, still F's across the board. Like we have tremendous amounts of work to do. Bob said to me, we need to reinvest in the schools. The schools have gotten a lot of money, and throwing money at a problem doesn't fix a problem. We need a plan to figure out. This is about 40% of all of the kids in Connecticut are in these three cities. As Dr. Beckett had pointed out to me, this is the future leaders and workforce of this state, and we're failing about half of them here badly. How do we fix this problem? And I mean, obviously, this is a project that's going to have to be undertaken.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
I know you've heard from Dr. Beckett. Now he can jump in, but we have a very similar perspective on this, which is it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's called smart money. You have to use your money smartly, and I think it really starts with both top down and bottom up leadership. And what I mean by that is, first of all, with our plan, we're looking at several different things. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you've probably talked about this a little bit. But when we look at, for example, restructuring the ECS formula, we've talked about that. When we get better student teacher ratios, the moment you bring it from 30, 35, 40 kids per teacher in a class down to, say, 20, or maybe even less, maybe get to 15, you know that it's the degraded experience goes away. Because when it's 35, 40 to a teacher, it's a degraded experience. That means you need more teachers. And because it's challenging in the inner city, they're already underpaid, and then they're overburdened. And then on top of that, they have a lot of disciplinary action. Right. So you really need to focus on that. So I think in the end, too, you get what you pay for. So if I have throw a lot of money and I have a lot of, so they call it quantitative versus qualitative. I can go high volume or I can go high value. And what I mean by this is if I get a teacher, say, who's worth 100,000 versus a teacher who's worth 75,000, but the 100,000 comes with a lot more quality in terms of the way let's be honest, not all teachers are built equal. We know that. There's a lot of great teachers, but there's some teachers who are teachers of the year, and there's some teachers who just get by. We understand it's a challenging environment, but we need to attract our best to address the hardest areas. And it also economically, I think besides restructuring it, we need to look at increasing the early age funding. So right now, third grade, you mentioned the scores are atrocious in places like New Haven. I think it's something like 17 or 23% or whatever it is are literate in New Haven. And that's unfathomable. I think that's what you're getting at, Joe. And really what we're talking about is there's a lot of money being spent, but how much money is on early childhood education when it matters most?
That's right.
I think that we need to take the money from the later years, shuffle them over to the earlier years. See, that's the thing. I don't think it's just about increasing the dollars. I think it's about shifting the dollars and putting the right leadership and oversight in place. Then, on top of that, if we regionalize, where we take the administrative burden off of teachers, because they're already doing enough, and we say, you know what, the back office redundancies and other redundancies, we bring that up to a regional level. And yeah, there's going to be some administrators who might lose their jobs because that's redundancy. But guess what? We take those dollars saved, shift them back to the teachers. I didn't raise the money. I took the money saved from elimination redundancy, put it back in teachers to teach. So these are the types of things that Dr. Beck and I are looking at. One of the last ones, which I think is a big point, and in fact, I was just on with Faith Acts earlier with Dr. Beckett. They represent 80 churches across Bridgeport, New Haven, and Bridgeport. I made a key point to them. Splitting education, purely academic education spending from social spending. Right now, when you bundle those two numbers, you give a lot of money to a town, a city, a school district, and they use a lot more of it for social spend that augments the teachers. It all goes into an education budget. But what does it really allocate to? I think if you actually split them and said, this is exactly for teachers and anything academic, and this stuff over here is social spend, where now some towns need more, some towns need less. Now you have better measurability. And one thing I know, the better the measurement, the better the accountability, and the better you can make some changes to make sure you get the proper improvement. So those are just some ideas that Dr. Beck and I have come up with that we think, and it's out of a lot of research, we think we're right. We think we have the best plan in a long time. Last comment I want to leave you with. Since the debate, I've probably had 2 phone calls, a number of Twitter DMs, Facebook DMs, and email from teachers all around the state who told me our plan's the best plan they've seen in years, decades even, in one instance. And I'm like, wow, that really touched me. I got to forward this to you, Chip. I don't know if I forwarded this to you.
That's great. That's great.
But yeah, I'll stop there. But I think there's just a lot of great work we can do.
I worked in the public school system as a tutor, and don't get me, the teachers were wonderful. But do you think maybe the federal funds are forcing the teachers to teach a certain way? Because what I noticed was the teachers, they become teachers because they love students. They want to teach. They want to do what's right. But it seemed like they were forced to, okay, we got to do this curriculum. This is the way it is. 1, 2, 3. Do you think it's the federal funding?
Yeah, there has to be a standardization from the from the Department of Education, the statewide level down. But yes, when you take federal dollars, you have to be careful of
Right.
the hand that feeds you, because then it starts to influence your outcomes and your
Right.
measurability. And if we really want our own Connecticut character, we need to be careful. Now, there are instances where federal funds are great. As I mentioned before, if we split education spend,
Right.
social spend, and we have the federal dollars hit the social spend, great. Let's augment. But our core of teaching, the moment you take that and you apply to teachers, then yes, there are instances where they might have to start listening to the federal government and how
Right.
they apply. And as we've heard, teaching to the test. I don't think that's the right approach. I think we need to make sure that everyone has different learning models, as we know.
Exactly.
But we have to match the right learning models to the right students. We have to give our parents and our students choice. Chip and I like to say this. Really, Chip likes to say it. I just adopted it, Chip. Sorry. But
Mhm.
students should come first, not fourth. And there's this list of like administrators, parents, and you get to no, students should be first, then everyone else. Obviously,
Right.
parents right after them, right? Because it is their children. But when you take students in mind and you go, if I was a student now, how would I feel about, like you're saying, that the teacher telling me, no, 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 study it like this, learn it like this, so you can take a
Right.
test like that,
That's right.
rather than actually
Teaching
inherently
it.
understanding
Exactly.
and growing properly.
Exactly. That's a
And
big
Mich-
deal. Absolutely.
and Michelle, if
Yeah.
you worked in schools, teaching a test is kind of a failure, right? That's like pulling an all-nighter in college that I'm gonna cram
Absolutely.
for this
It's just
test.
memorization.
Half
Exactly.
the time, people did worse than I knew that did it because they were up all night and they couldn't remember anything.
Right.
The idea about a test is to just give a scorecard about where are you at and how
That's
do you
right.
compare to your previous tests.
That's right.
And I think we need to be comparing less about a town schools than to say child 151 in the New Haven school system advanced by 13 months of education in the last year. That's a great thing. If you only advance by 10 months, then we ought to be saying what happened to that kid. And if that is a
Yeah.
group of kids, then you really have accountability to say that that teacher is not advancing. But what their raw score is should be compared to what they got previously, not just across the country saying, oh, that kid, those group of kids didn't do as well as across the country. Because I think you lose the value of testing and accountability at that point.
And this is big because, I mean, we need leaders who would think about the future. So that's wonderful. Yeah, you're right.
I talked to Susan Beisowitz about 2 weeks ago, and I mentioned to her how much money the Lamont administration has
Oh, yeah.
put into mental health. And I incorrectly said it was 100 million. She corrected me at 200 million. And then I had to ask, where is all that money going? Because it seems as though the mental health crisis is worse. When it comes to crime, it's down. It's on a 10-year decline. And I know for a lot of people, especially the people in the burbs, they're seeing it more. So now it
Right.
feels like it's getting closer. I don't think that's the case, but I do think the mental health crisis is driving. Murder is up, rape is up, violent assaults are up. Again, I think this is another instance where we took a bunch of money and we have nothing to show for it at this point.
Right. And I think that, again, it's about leadership. It's about getting into the details, and not just. I think that's what you get with multimillionaires who everyone just gives them what they want, and they don't really need to go into detail. So it's like, okay, okay, Governor Lamont, I'll handle that. And then you get a mismanaged peer project from
Right.
93 million to 255 million. He's like, wait, what? It's mismanaged? And then you talk about mental health. No, it's not 100 million, it's 200 million. And you say, where did it go? Well, yes, Susan, I'd like to know. And so the thought is, who's leading it? How are we deploying it? How are we measuring it? What are the
Mhm.
results? So for me, look, I'm going through what they call LRP right now, long range planning at the bank. We have to plan out 2023, 2024, 2025. We have to do it 6 ways to Sunday to make sure we're getting every dollar back. How are our customers being served? Are they high satisfaction numbers? How are we serving our colleagues in the bank? I'm just giving you an example, but the point is there's a whole lot of rigor to make sure we get the right outcomes.
Right.
Where is the rigor when you apply these dollars to make sure you have the right outcomes? I'm willing to guarantee you, Joe, they don't have that. And they have no intention of doing that. And so because they can say, thank you very much, I got your vote, moving on. We need different leadership. And I honestly, I got to look into that. Now you really got me curious. So after this, I'm going to go look at the 200 million and see where it went.
I love it. Awesome.
There's no accountability either.
Well, clearly not.
One of the things, too, that I used to argue with my Republican friends was they said, oh, we need smaller government, smaller government. I would argue we need effective government.
Yes.
It's not necessarily large or small.
Yep.
It works at the level that we need it to work at.
Right.
And I think that is forgotten. It's the results, it's the accountability that gets ignored. So we either spend money or we don't spend money, but that's a really poor way to judge anything.
Right.
No business would judge, I did great because I spent an extra 200 million on payroll. It would be, did I produce more products? Did I sell more? Did I have better profitability? Were the customers more satisfied? There's a lot of questions to be answered.
I would also argue the reason why Chip and I are the best choice, or what we say is the better choice, but I really say it's the best choice, is we can take the best ideas from anywhere when, if either party has any, we'll gladly take them and adopt them. Well, my main point is adoptability and adaptability. We have the highest ability to do both of those things, adopt and adapt. And our competitors do not. So, for example, are we looking at best practices? Again, in technology, doesn't matter what industry it's in. It could be tech in gaming, tech in finance, tech, you name it. We're going to look at best practices and say, what did the best do? How can we take the best of what they do and apply it here? I'm almost willing to bet you we have a lot of ego-driven people, because when you're an incumbent, 95% of the time, you get lazy and you're really not challenged. So you're like, why do I have to go for a best practice? Whereas when it's your first time in, you have something to prove, you stay hungry, and you want to make sure you're doing the right thing for everybody. So I would challenge everyone out there listening that, look, if you want a different outcome, you need different leadership. And specifically on holding others accountable all the way down. So if we're talking about 200 million for mental health, Chip and I would immediately go and make it a priority and say, where are our biggest spends? How do we measure that? Who's in charge? And then say, it doesn't mean you go firing everybody. That's not you got to look at it and say, okay, guys, where do we have a deficiency?
Where's it going?
How do we work it through?
I mean, Rob, the governmental accounting or accountability organization at the federal level even admitted they don't know where half the money goes. I was reading this, I'm like flabbergasted. But this is why we can spend trillions of dollars, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, okay, great." So yeah, there's a problem.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So you need a strong person at OPM in the state in order to understand, Office of Policy Management, but really controlling spend and doing all the budgetary numbers and making sure it all looks good and we're playing. So there's a lot of things we can do. And again, you need leaders who can listen and again, operations people with executive experience. That's what the state needs with breadth and depth. And I really don't see it when you stack up. If you took money off the table, and you stacked the deck and you said Rob and Chip, Ned and Susan, Bob and Laura, and you circled our skill sets and you just removed the dollars, I'm almost certain people would go, wait, and you heard us speak and you heard how engaging we are and you realize we know what we're talking about. We're not just winging it on talking points. I think people would understand, you know what, we got to, give these guys some serious consideration here. Now, there's some folks who've been telling me that the polls are so off. They think that Chip and I not only may have a chance to win, we want to win. Don't get me wrong, we want to win, but we know that a lot of it's dollars and programming. But I think people will be shocked that we fare pretty well this time around. And worst case scenarios, I'm just getting warmed up. So I told Bob whispered over to me at one of our events. He goes, Rob, I have to win now, because he's in his 60s. Right? and I'm only 44. And I said, I have to win now too, Bob. Just like you. So he's
I
just like,
would like to point out, by the way, we are 50 minutes into this conversation, no talking points. No one has tried to dodge a question by
That's right.
mentioning abortion.
oh,
It is a breath of fresh air, and to spare you both, I wanted. I mean, again, we're so far in. Just real quick, women's reproductive rights. Not the
You had to go there.
it's not what the Democrats wanted it to be. I think we all know, for the most part, the state of Connecticut, it's in pretty good shape. It's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. It would take a devastating result in this election that I don't see coming at all. If you could just kind of briefly just state your view on that.
yeah, and I'll let Dr. Beckett jump in here if you'd like, but ours has been pretty clear, right? We agree with the law. It's what Connecticut expects, and a woman's right to choose. It's a health option. It's health access, essentially, and really the removal of Roe v. Wade really eliminated a safety net across the nation that a lot of women, the majority of women, have come to. Not all women, clearly, but the majority of women in the United States of America have shown that they want and they need for various reasons. So we respect that. And that's really what we need to do, it's codified in law, as Bob Stefanowski said, but it's more than that. It's really now come to become what is expected, right? That you have healthcare access, because you don't want it. You want it safe, legal, and rare. And we focus on, it may not be my choice, but my point is being a choice candidate. I don't want to take choices away from somebody else. We shouldn't have the government telling you what to do with your body. Right? It doesn't matter. So that's the funny thing. It should be consistent. I think for me and Chip, we're consistent. I don't want to put anything in your body just like, I don't want to tell you what to do with your body, unless you're harming somebody else on purpose. That's different. Right? But listen, I don't want to take away your choice. I don't choose it, but it doesn't mean I want to stop someone else from their choices in their life. Right? So I'm a big fan of, the government shouldn't be in your pocket or in your bedroom or in your doctor's office. You know what? Those are your decisions. You want to harm yourself. I disagree with harming yourself. I really do. But anyway, that would be overall the position.
And I would completely agree. I think we have a multicultural society. We've got atheists and agnostics and Catholics and Jews and Hindus and Confucians and everything else in this country and in this state. And not all of them share exactly the same value set. And I think that we need to let people go along. The other thing is, they had problems in Texas because they can't tell the difference between a miscarriage and abortion. Well, my wife and I, we had a miscarriage, and I think what husband or significant other wants their wife or girlfriend to be septicemic and ready to die before they're ready to get medical care? That makes no sense to me at all.
Government by the people. Interesting. Interesting fact.
All right, so let's talk about. I think this is one of the more important things. Governor Lamont is the first Connecticut governor in over 100 years to appear on 3 different ballot lines in this election. Obviously, Bob Stefanowski wanted your spot too. So these guys wanted to just take all the spots for themselves. Can you guys talk about, and I want you to talk also about ranked choice voting, because it is something we need in Connecticut. I would like to see early voting. I hope question 1 is passed. But you guys have had a very difficult time as independent candidates. This state, and most of them, I would assume, are very much set by the Democrats and the Republicans. 41% of this state is unaffiliated. You're exactly what people want. Where is the disconnect, do you think, where people aren't just eating this up? Because this is refreshing, what you guys are doing tonight.
Yes.
I fundamentally think it's about belief that you can win. The thing about politics is that it's so cultural and ingrained in people's brains now, of blue jerseys and red jerseys.
That's right.
Unfortunately. And it's not really about who's behind the jersey. What should matter is the leader, the candidate, the elected official. Chip and I are students of history. We're well aware, no matter how much I love Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, I do love those guys, but they founded political parties that almost tore the country apart under George Washington. People don't, and it's been here since then. So the thought is that really what we need, and there's a couple things here. Let's progressively go through them very quickly. Ranked choice voting is the best thing we could do to eliminate this concept of spoiler vote. Because the moment you can rank your people, most people, I've been saying this for a long time, there's a lot of anti-voting going on. You vote against something or against somebody because you're not happy with your choices. And it's strange how both parties keep putting up like the wrong people. I'm telling you, I don't think Bob was the right guy, and I don't think Ned's the right guy. I don't think Biden and Trump are the right guys. There's better people. For whatever reason, they keep putting up these candidates. So I think that what we ought to do is introduce ranked choice voting. Chip and I are committed in the first 30, 60 days to put in a ranked choice voting bill. Now, we had every opportunity to win the Greeble-Frank line, but we received the call. I received the call that they gave it to Governor Lamont. And the first question I asked was, Governor Lamont, really? That was the question. And I said, come on. Why would he? But they said he committed to introduce ranked choice voting as legislative action come next legislative cycle if he wins. I said, okay, I'm going to match that commitment because when I defeat Governor Lamont with Chip, then we're going to see. But I said we're going to hold his feet to the fire and hold him accountable to introduce this. So now it's on all of us. The moment he introduces it, that makes it easier for everyone. So now you could rank your better choice, who you really want to vote for, and then you can always have your backup in case that person doesn't win. Well, you got your backup. And so that would really help us with instant runoffs. But then I'll go a step further. Alaska has this great concept of Final Five mixed with ranked choice voting, where parties don't matter. And they just take whoever's running for candidate. So when you register at the state and you say you're running for governor or whatever, they take those people and they put them out and they get this volume set and they return it back and they eliminate the ballot down. Parties don't even matter anymore. It actually, Final Five eliminates the concept of party. Now, people thought it would tear apart the Democratic Republican Party. It hasn't. In fact, it's made better outcomes already in Alaska if you look closely enough. The other one I want people to understand is open primaries versus closed primaries. I'm sorry, as a taxpayer, I was unaffiliated for a long time. When I left the Democratic Party because I couldn't deal with the corruption and what was going on and the taxation increases, then I was a registered unaffiliated for a long time before I became a Republican. And in that time, I looked at this concept of open primaries and closed primaries. I realized, wait, I'm paying money, but I can't vote in that primary.
Yep.
And I just want to be clear. So everyone out there, 41% of us pay taxes to have primaries conducted, but then we can't participate in those primaries. It's a simple concept of open primaries where if I'm a registered unaffiliated, I get a choice of either primary, not both. I must go to one or the other, place my vote. People go, oh, that'll destroy the party. But really, are party politics doing our country a favor? Are we going the right direction with party politics? Wouldn't it be refreshing if the registered unaffiliated got their choice within that party to represent, and then they got to the general election and everyone gets to vote again? I think you get better outcomes.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, and I agree with RCV too. I mean, voters actually learn about the candidates. Don't look at the blue or the red. That's a huge deal. No one really knows any. You vote for the lesser of two evils, if you will. And this is the problem where we are in this country. You're right.
Well, look, just for example, I read the Hartford Business Journal coming out of the debate. And I don't know if you guys read this article, but think about it. Ned Lamont was more conservative with the surplus than Bob Stefanowski. Bob is the Republican who's supposed to be conservative. He keeps talking about spend and spend and spend and spend. And Ned, who's the Democrat, who's supposed to be the spender, is like, save and save and save and save. Wait a second. What is going on here, Michelle? Joe, please tell me what is going on, because
I laugh whenever someone's like, Ned Lamont's so liberal. I'm like, okay, that guy's not a liberal. That's a rich guy that bought the Democratic nomination. Let's be clear here. Bob was a Democrat until he wasn't. So, if you're looking for like a legitimate, straightforward person, again, having talked to all of the other opponents, and I've also talked to Dr. Aaron Lewis, by the way, who is the libertarian and who's a fantastic man, and a guy who, honestly, I can ask him 3 questions. He could fill an hour. He does not even need you to ask questions. That's how on top of things he is. But you guys, every time I talk to you guys, it's straight answers. It's literally laying out plans.
It's great.
And again, right, as far as I can tell, it's what people really want. And so my whole thing, I've been accused recently of favoring the independents. And I said, look, I am guilty of this myself. I've gone into voting booths, and in years past, I would see Rob Hoitling's. I wouldn't know who that was. I wouldn't have bothered to follow up and find out who. I would have saw you on the debates and be like, oh, this guy's pretty sharp. I told you when we talked last time, you got that Andrew Yang cool guy vibe, and you're next to these 2 dorks. I'm sure it helped.
I was gonna say, Joe, the independents are better looking, don't you think?
It is. It's funny. It is a much better looking crew. It's a cooler group of people who are shooting you straight, who don't just give you the party line,
Right.
who don't say, the dangerous rhetoric. I just called Bob Stefanowski out for an ad, and he hid behind the pack where they accuse the Democrats of being friends with criminals and it's like, wow, man, in light of what just happened in this state, to suggest that the Democrats did it and are cool with it, that's the kind of stuff that gets people killed. And I'm so fed up with that stuff. And over the last 3 months, to have been able to put a spotlight on the unaffiliated, the minor party candidates, if you will, to me, it was important to do that for the voters, because I think a lot of people are tired of these 2 parties.
Yeah.
And while we've said that number a bunch of times, 41%. If the 41% got together and we're like, no, neither one of these 2 guys, it wouldn't even be close.
Right. Because let's remember, the 41's just registered unaffiliated. You have a lot of disaffected Republicans and Democrats who also aren't happy with their choices.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, right. So again, listen, and Rob, they're not going a Democrat who's not happy with Ned Lamont is not going to vote for Bob Stefanowski.
Right.
They're going to end up voting for Ned anyway.
Well,
hold on.
Okay.
I'm saying minus you guys. Now that there's the option of, well, I don't have to reward Ned for not liking it. I don't have to vote for the Republican. I have another choice.
That's right.
Right. Exactly. And that's really what. Go ahead, Chip.
Well, I was going to say, the other thing is, I think people ought to take a step back and look at their state. I got out of school in the early 80s, came back, and, Connecticut was doing pretty well at that time. But if you look at 40 years, 50 years of our cities declining in opportunity, our educational system having a bigger achievement gap. All right, if you don't like the Republicans, but what have the Democrats done for the urban areas and for our economy in general? Because they run the state for 70 years. There was the House was Republican, I think, in the 50s or early 60s, and the Republicans had the Senate in the early 80s. And other than that, it's been bicameral legislatures of the Democrats. So if you're not happy with it, why are you voting for either of the parties that have brought you failure and decline?
Because they feel they have to, or they'll throw their vote away.
The lesser of 2 evils, yes.
I have pointed out to listeners so often, it's not your job to make sure Ned Lamont doesn't lose. It's not your job. If he didn't earn your vote, he didn't earn your vote. There's other people in this race. And again, it's not going to be Bob for those people. So here's some other really tasty choices who, again, are actually giving you policy and plan and talking about the things they'll do to make your life better. It's not the talking points. It's not the rhetoric. It's real answers to the actual questions. And I appreciate both of you guys
absolutely
for coming here and again being so candid and open. And Michelle, this is it's refreshing. It
It's
just is.
awesome. It's awesome. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you,
really
guys.
appreciate you guys giving us an opportunity to speak.
Thank
You
you,
know,
guys.
I think that this is I've said it up and down the state. I think there's a sea change coming. There's a reason 41% of people in Connecticut voters are unaffiliated. They just said, you know what? I'll see what my choices are. They want choice. I'll see what I feel.
That's right.
And after that, really, I got to say, the debate on Tuesday and the billboards they put up, Chip and I have gotten, definitely directly to me, I've gotten the most support, just outpouring of support. And people
Awesome.
said, Rob, I never even heard of you until I saw the billboard and I saw the debate. Where have you been? Where's Chip been? Glastonbury, like they didn't.
Yeah.
And the sad part is, I ask people, if Chip and I won the lottery tomorrow, would that change everything? We'd still be the same guys. Does that just make us more viable? Because you don't challenge our qualification. You're challenging our quote-unquote viability because we don't have the ability to multiply our message. So really the thought is this. For everyone listening, have someone else. Just say, hey, did you hear about these guys? Check them out. That's all. Check out our plan. I've been challenging every teacher I know to go to my education plan. I said, please, and I respond to everybody that writes me. Chip, right? Tell him. We even responded to a guy who said, withdraw, drop out of the race. And we still responded. What did he say? Thanks for responding, Rob. It's like, you know what?
Yes.
No, sometimes, Michelle, you guys know, sometimes
Oh,
you
yeah.
have haters who just want you out because
Right.
they don't even, it's like irrational. But when you actually engage and you go, well, why do you want us to withdraw? And they're like, well, we're scared because of these policies. You're not really negative about our plans. You're scared that this other person is going to go take the state in a negative direction and we're not helping. But do you really believe this other choice you have? You know, so it's like, really, they're lesser bads. It's like you're trying to figure, they're not good. You're just saying which one's less bad. It's a different mindset rather than who you're actually for. So I would really challenge everyone out there that, and I say this all the time. In fact, I said this right to the Faith Acts group earlier with Chip and I. I said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yes.
So I challenged the essentially the black pastors. I said, I know they vote Democrat, but what have the Democrats done for the inner city for the past 20 years? So if you want something different, you have to think differently. And I've said this in every community. So again, I really appreciate you guys even giving us opportunity to speak.
This is great.
We hope that regardless of the outcome of the election, vote your what do they say here, Joe? Vote your conscience.
Yeah.
And it's not your job to stop someone else. It's your job to vote and vote your conscience.
Right. What's it going to affect you? How do you want your candidate to work for you? Exactly.
My twisted Rob Hotaling soundbite for tonight is don't be insane. Vote Hotaling Beckett. That's what I took out of this. Yep. Guys, listen, we really appreciate you coming on, and it's our pleasure to give you the platform because you guys certainly have a winning platform. Best of luck to you on Tuesday. And going forward, whatever happens with you guys, I hope we'll be able to talk again because I you talk about there being a lack of leadership in Connecticut, and whatever happens, you two guys really do need to be making a difference in the state of Connecticut. And so whatever it looks like on the 9th, let's talk because you'll always have a platform here with us.
Well, yeah, I'd love to come back, Chip. Regardless of the outcome of the election, I'd love to come back and even do a post-election debate analysis and outcome analysis.
Awesome.
And what do they call it when CNN and the people walk out and they interview them and they say, who you vote for who or why'd you vote? Or they don't even tell you, but they at least tell you the issue that mattered most, right?
Right.
It'll be interesting. All right, Rob Hotaling. Would you say, Dr. Beckett?
I said, thanks very much. It was great.
My pleasure. Always great to see you guys. Rob Hotaling and Chip Beckett, we really appreciate your time. For Michelle Botelho, I'm Joe Aguiar. Thank you so much for watching CT Politics TV.
Hello, my name is Joe Aguiar. I'm the president of Clovercrest Media Group. And here at CMG, we have a wide variety of podcasts, including sports shows like Keys to the City, The Roll Call, Throwing Jabs, All Four Downs, and Jawing About the G-Men. And great true crime shows like Sticky Week, Crimes and Consequences, Ivy League Murders, and Burn, the unsolved murder of David Eichmann. You can find all these podcasts and so much more by visiting clovercrestmedia.com.